HBCUvoice.com. Always on, all the time.
Let's face it, shopping for insurance can be time-consuming. That's why when it comes to your auto, home, and life insurance needs, make things simple and trust the experts at Allstate. They will help you get the coverage that fits your needs while helping you bundle your life, home, and auto policies. Bundling saves you money, sure, but it also saves you time, so you can enjoy the things that matter most even more. Contact me, Tammy Haynes, your local agent, for a free personalized insurance quote. Allstate, are you in good hands?
I'm attorney Clinton Paris, and Tampa's my community. I grew up here, went to school here, and my wife and I make our home here. What makes Tampa special are its people. So when I represent someone injured in my community, it's personal. Call my office and speak to a real lawyer and not some referral service. I will fight the insurance companies to get the settlement that you deserve. At the law office of Clinton Paris, we take the pain out of being hurt.
True Black Essentials is a retail opportunity to bring Black businesses under one roof, where every product on every shelf in every aisle will be Black owned and Black produced by people all over the world. Statistics show that the $1.3 trillion of spending power that we have as Black people can easily be turned into each Black person having $2 million if we were to shop Black for 2 years. So True Black Essentials will launch an e-commerce store on November 1st, 2020, but we will open up brick and mortar stores in Atlanta, New Orleans, Charlotte, Houston, and Jacksonville, with the very first store opening in Atlanta, June 19, 2021.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Ville, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with this hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
Good morning, this is Dr. Ville with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. We have Tali Carr as our guest, as well as BJ Jones, the HBCU football guru. We just call him simply the HBCU analyst, football analyst in so many different ways. Tali, I think Mike Washington has the same problem Charles had last week in terms of the cement on his feet. We
Well, what are you guys
going for? It's like, I didn't do it. I'm just saying it's not me.
Yeah, I heard. I saw y'all were talking pretty well about me. Nice one, Tali. I like.
Hey, look, I had fans at the Magic City going into as soon as I got into the parking lot yesterday, Charles, man.
Oh yeah.
That
was fun stuff yesterday. Fun stuff. Woo.
Man, it was a big Saturday. Man, we got two teams that clinched. We had a possibility of one, and we get both of them. All things are settled for the SWAC championship game. We still have 1 week to play. We have a MEAC football game that we can discuss a little bit as we jump into it. But before we get into the analysis of these games and then do a little preview for the following week, and if you like, we can even sneak in maybe some early thoughts of the SWAC championship game. We still don't know where it's going to be played. May come down to the good old-fashioned coin flip. How about that?
Wow.
Well, with that said, let me go straight to you, Charles. Any just thoughts on this past weekend that you want to share with the viewers?
I thought it was very interesting, but it was definitely the Prairie View UAPB game that generated a whole lot of interest and buzz on my phone in terms of people texting and things of that nature and giving their thoughts on UAPB. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about Texas Southern, Jackson State folks, Alcorn folks, but they had a vested interest in making sure Southern some type of way didn't get to the SWAC championship game. So I don't know what that was about.
Yeah, that's some of that old like love or hate, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Welcome to episode 128, weekend edition of Inside the HBCU Sports Live radio show and podcast, the show that's covering the sporting HBCU diaspora, all things HBCU sports, the institutions large and small, from NAIA to the NCAA. We share insights, information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavill, along with my co-host, Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. As you heard, Mike Washington is out on assignment. We have our normal HBCU football analyst, BJ Jones, and we also have none other than Tyler Carr of HBCU Game Day joining us. As you know, BJ Jones is also part of HBCU Game Day as an analyst over there. We like to borrow him, and so you see, we create a partnership of things that happen, especially when you have somebody as great as BJ Jones, just the analyst. How can you not make sure that you get some of that? With that, we'll get in there. He's smiling a little bit today. They defeated Grambling in the Bayou Classic, moved up to Shreveport. So we'll get into that. And it was a mollywhopping or whatever, some of the terms that BJ Jones talks about where people just get beat down. The Alabama A&M game in the Magic City Classic was interesting for about a half until a quarterback seemed to get hurt. I think maybe it was a concussed situation, and then that did what it did. But then you had the old game that nobody could see. You could hear it, but you couldn't see it. That turned into a classic in so many different ways in terms of Prairie View and Pine Bluff. But as I said, let's just start out a little bit about the MEAC side of things before we get into it. But before I do that, let me ask BJ Jones, any just general thoughts on the Saturday that you want to share?
Oh man, biggest thing was that in Birmingham, that game took a turn once Alabama State's quarterback was injured. Once he was injured, they could no longer manufacture any offense through the air. Ezra Gray had a solid day on the ground. And if you look at that yards per carry average, Alabama State did great there, but through the air was a challenge to say the least. And it's going to be interesting to see where that Alabama State football team goes, because it seems like that football team will go as far as Ryan Nettles will carry them. So it'll be interesting to look at them during the fall.
Man, y'all already ready for some fall, man. We'll get into some fall. Hold your horses. I know it. I know you're ready. Today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Live is sponsored by THG Agency. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. With that, Tyler, you were down there in the mix in Magic City Classic in Birmingham. Just in terms of the culture, before we get into some of just the magic of the game in a lot of ways, how was the culture? You talked about you were getting it early and often while you were down in Birmingham. You're a big face.
Man, look, they got me literally getting out of my truck in the parking lot. The first person I ran into was an Alabama A&M fan. I think he was a Kappa too, if I'm not mistaken. Not that means anything, but just BJ. No shots to you, BJ. And he said, "Man, y'all got to correct something on your website."
So many of them cane hits to the head.
Yeah, where the cane is coming from. So he said, y'all got to correct something on your website. And I was thinking to myself, oh God, what have we got wrong? And I said, what, man? What do we need to correct? He said, all that talk about Jackson State is the best. Alabama A&M is the best. So he hit me with a little joke early on. But the fans were great, man. Of course, it was a limited capacity crowd. So it felt kind of strange to be there at Legion Field and be able to move freely and then get in and get out. I mean, I pulled up like probably 10 minutes before kickoff, went straight upstairs and, set my camera up in time for the game. And, usually when you get there, man, it is elbow to elbow everywhere you go. So, I try to look at the positive side, man. If you had a ticket, if you had an opportunity to get there, you were a part of history, a Spring Magic City Classic, and the promoters and the league doing all that they could to just make sure that they keep this ship afloat, man, until we can get back to something as close to normal in the fall. We hope. I saw Dr. McClellan; he was there. I saw his son. What is it? Kanan that plays for Jackson State.
Yeah.
Yeah. I challenged him to a game of horse. I know I can't beat him 1-on-1, but I told him next time I see him, I want to play some horse. So it was pretty cool, man. All things considered, and one of the last, maybe, I don't know. There was a lot of discussion there about the future of Legion Field and what's going to happen there with the Magic City Classic. So you just try to take it all in, man, because you just never know, what the future holds in the years to come.
Great point. And so it sounds like you had a fan that was doing like Dr. Hill Ely talked about, wants his shoe back, or was it Coach Maynard talking about get some more 4-5 stars?
Hey, look, man, it's the swag, man. They're gonna come for the coaches, the media. They recognize your face, man. They're gonna have some smoke for you, but it's all fun, man. It's all fun.
Yeah, the swag is rough in there. Who wants that smoke? Let me go back to BJ Jones a little bit, since we're on the Birmingham. You're obviously from that area, know a lot about that. Are you hearing anything in regards to the stadium? I know they're building the new stadium for UAB, and it's going to be state of the art, and they're probably going to want to use that for the city championships. I know high school is big, football is big there. Used to be played in Legion Field, but are they talking about moving those games? And then we heard some little tidbits from Commissioner Dr. Charles McCullen talking about that the facility may be a place that they're looking to play the championship game. And so thus, is that something that the Magic City Classic promoters you think would jump into, as Tyler Carr was alluding to?
Yeah, so I think, the biggest thing for Birmingham is that new facility is almost completed. They'll be completed in another few months, but the big question is, hey, with Legion Field being there and being a staple of Birmingham for so long, do we keep both? A lot of people say no, move everything to the new facility. The new facility, capacity-wise, is a lot smaller. Legion Field seats close to, I think it's 71,000. The new facility right now only seats like 45 and some change. I have seen the drawings where there's an upper deck expansion to get it to 55, and that's the highest that they want to go there.
Okay.
So, that's a question for Alabama State and Alabama A&M fans. Would you like the Magic City Classic to move in a better location downtown, but with smaller capacity? There has not been a long-term plan for Legion Field, whether to keep it or blow it up, but keeping two stadiums and the upkeep is expensive on any municipality. So that's a big question. I know that there was a lot of heartburn from the UAB people a couple of weeks ago because they pretty much wanted something in writing from the city saying that there would be no additional collegiate games at the new stadium for at least 3 years. The city declined that. So that pretty much lets UAB know that, hey, even though you guys will be the primary tenant, we're still looking for other venues, other games to fill up the calendar, during the year. So UAB will have the same agreement that they had in place for Legion Field. A lot of people have been talking, say, hey, it's UAB Stadium. No, it's not. UAB would just be the primary tenant, just as they were at Legion Field. So that leaves the possibilities open for the SWAC and a lot of other conferences. I know that the Morehouse-Tuskegee game is moving to Birmingham. Not sure which facility it's going to be played at, but that decision was made a little bit less than a year ago. So we're going to see what all events. The mayor has said that he wants to bring back HBCU football. He's an HBCU guy. Morehouse graduate, wants to bring more HBCU games to Birmingham.
BJ, is there an emotional attachment from the Birmingham community, especially much like we see here in Houston with the Astrodome? Is that same dynamic in place with Legion Field for the Birmingham community?
Yes, for the reason being, man, the Magic City Classic been played there for so long, and we're talking about go back through history during the civil rights era and what the Magic City Classic was. It was oftentimes a meeting up spot, the things to get planned. We talk about, Dr. Martin Luther King at the 1964 Magic City Classic and how he used that to kind of gather people for the march in Selma coming up in March. That came up, using those two student bodies, then Alabama State College and Alabama A&M. So that was the only place where us as Black people could meet, and it would be okay. Legion Field was integrated really before the state was, with hosting the Magic City Classic and so forth. So when you go down through history, there's a historical tie, especially with Black people in the Birmingham area, because when Alabama and Auburn and all of those teams pulled out, it was still the Magic City Classic that stayed there and was the staple event for the stadium.
Man, great point. Following up, go ahead, jump in there, Tommy.
I'll tell you, me and Mo Carter was standing beside each other for the whole game because we had to shoot from up top on that little lip just outside of press row. And, look, we're not politicians and we don't run government, but just standing there and the thought of blowing Legion Field up, it's like, I can't see it. Like, if you think about the history, not only for the SWAC, but, the Iron Bowl and what that means to that whole community. But that's why people are also pack rats. You don't ever want to throw anything away, and you have a closet full of stuff over time. So that's going to be a tough decision to make. And the other thing I thought about is, as we return to life post-COVID, whenever that might be, we go back to 70,000 people, or is 40,000 people more realistic? Not only with safety measures, but just people's comfortability of going back out in public and being elbow to elbow for 3-4 hours. So there's a lot of things that you can't put your finger on and say this is exactly what's going to happen. So it's going to take a lot of data analysis and probably a little bit of guessing in there as well as to figuring out the best thing to do.
Yeah, we can help with a little bit of data analysis, as we said. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Great points made by all. And we told you we'll get into some of that sports culture. We'll get into the business. One of the few places that you can get it live in terms of what we do on Inside HBCU Sports. And we bring in the experts to talk about it. Perfect question when you look at the HBCU culture. And there's a couple of lenses that you look at it. In terms of a African-American Black cultural community, you see that affinity to the historical knowledge of our past. And a lot of that is because historically, at least I believe, from some of the research that I've seen, is that we've lost that connection of history over so many years in terms of back in the time from enslavement. And even if you go back to after, those that choose to be connected to that, you see the cultural need to pay homage to your history from that framework. And that is a component of the community culture that is extremely important. You don't necessarily see that from a European centric. While they house their history, they have no problem about creating new neighborhoods, new frameworks of doing that. And so that's a loss. But I think it is also intriguing when you talk about UAPB and the special type of privilege that they thought they had to even make that request. But there is the unique challenge. We've seen this in basketball when the SWAC basketball tournament moved from a smaller venue to go in, play into the professional arena, the NBA arena in Houston. And while you had some amenities that were really nice, a lot of people enjoyed it in terms of the crowd, that was different. I played a basketball game that was going to be at the State Fair in Birmingham, and they pulled it at the last minute because they double booked it. So I moved it over to the Bartlow Arena, and I didn't realize and should have understood the cultural history that a lot of African-American Blacks in the community don't necessarily have a connection with UAB and the trust there. So they weren't as comfortable about going over there. So it hurt in terms of some ticket sales. So you had those components. You see that with the State Fair Classic, similar situation in Dallas, where they're trying to decide, do you move that game? What's the big problem when some of the others, Cotton Bowl Classic, if you would, moving it from the Cotton Bowl to Jerry's Playhouse, and even Texas and OU, they didn't have a problem with movement, but they were financially rewarded to keep it there. But there's some questions. If you move it from the State Fair, what does it do to the State Fair Classic between Prairie View and Grambling? Similar with Texas Southern moving to BBVA Compass Stadium, still some issue with fan base. Hadn't necessarily had the greatest following, and not necessarily having winning records ties into that. So we're not just saying it's that type of thing, but going back to Charles when he said with the Astrodome and the connection with that. So it's always fascinating when you start looking at history, finances, business, cultural. How do you really research and tie it all in to help you make these type of decisions? Since we're talking a little bit about just where we're talking about with the culture, many of you have had thoughts all week on Tennessee State hiring Eddie George, but I want to get in a little bit more into the numbers. At the end of the week, we started hearing the numbers, $400K base salary, and then up to $100K in terms of incentives. Yes, no question the money is there, but just to give some people some framework, the highest salary pretty much for HBCU base was $300. Some may pushed it up to $325, and you get some incentives $350, maybe if you want to say best. But I'm not sure I remember seeing lately a base salary of $400K. So I just want to get your thoughts in terms of the money, where it's going, good, different. How do you feel about that? Let me go back to you, Charles, and your thoughts on $400K as a base salary. Nice.
$400K, that's a bit of a game change, if you will. I thought $300K was game changing, but when you think about, I guess, the Dion effect, or so to speak, of the ancillary.
He snuck that in there, the Dion effect.
I mean, it's the ancillary part of it, that you kind of take a look at, and you wonder whether that it will have the same sort of impact with Eddie George at Tennessee State, that, the media presence, at least, that Deion Sanders creates at Jackson State. So, it probably pushed that old contract up a little bit to say that, I basically can create the same sort of environment in Nashville that Deion Sanders has created in Jackson as well.
Good point. Let me go straight to you, VJ Jones. Any thoughts in terms of $400K as a base salary at the FCS level, particularly with an HBCU?
Man, I was like, wow, that's an amazing salary, to throw out there. And you wonder if that's going to kind of raise the window, because you're gonna have HBCU coaches with success. They're going to be asking some questions to their agents and ADs and presidents, as far as, hey, what can we do with my salary? If you got this guy who's come in who hadn't coached it down, and he's making this, and I've proven to do X, Y, and Z, what can we do about my salary? So sometimes I worry about things like that, because when you do that, you change the market, and you worry about us kind of outpricing ourselves.
Yeah, I think the point well taken when you talk about outpricing yourselves, but I look at it in terms of a market-driven framework. And I think you see this across any league, where you see those conferences that are teams that may have a bigger brand, more access to television revenue independently, thinking like the Lakers, the Yankees, if you would. If you take it to college, you may be looking at Alabama and Texas. Even within their sphere and their conference, they can outspend other teams because of historical components, i.e. winning, things of that nature. So you will have institutions that can't in and then choose, they kick up the market. The other schools just choose not to go there. So with that thought, let me go to Tyler Carr and see if he has any different framework that he is considering when looking at the $400K as a base salary.
Well, I think Eddie George's first job, and probably his primary job, is going to be fundraising. I think he's going to do a great job of surrounding himself with coaches. And he understands. I think it's a little overstated that we kind of act like Eddie George doesn't know anything about football. I mean, let's not forget, he was pretty rough. If injuries didn't cut his career short, he could have been a Hall of Fame player, definitely a Heisman Trophy winner. But I think he's going to be able to go out and earn that salary by the amount of revenue that he generates. But one thing that it always comes down to with fundraising, when you go and ask somebody for money or to invest in your program, your product, your business, especially with schools, the first thing they're going to want to know is, well, how much have you invested in it yourself? So I think it's going to be a strong move when you go out to corporate America to show, look, we have made a strong investment in our coach, and we want you to partner with us and make an equally strong investment into our program. And I think it'll be, you look at the broader scope of the HBCU universe, if it starts to have the, NFL quarterback, contract ecosystem where, one quarterback gets paid, then the next one gets paid, and then the guy who got paid first wants to get more. I think that's fine and good if you understand what Eddie George is potentially going to do. And if you look at that in its totality and you understand, man, I might have to get out here and be more of a fundraiser in addition to what I'm doing with coaching, then that puts you in a position where you're going to say, hey, I want the added responsibility to go along with this extra money that I'm asking for. You may say, I don't want none of that. I'm just fine where I'm at. So I try to look at the positive side because the better HBCU sports thrives, the better my business is, the more fulfilling it is for me, with that being one of my missions in life of trying to do my part to make sure HBCU sports can continue to climb and climb in HBCUs in general. So I think Eddie is going to bring a lot to the table outside of coaching that his critics need to be careful, because if he starts to do things a little differently and in different areas, then you're going to have to look and say, okay, do we need to do more of that? So I'm definitely taking the wait and see approach, but I think it could have a lot of positive outcomes, especially with what he means for that city and that state there in Nashville, Tennessee.
Certainly, let's take it back to the classroom, Texas Southern University. We have our BS in sport management, MS in sports management, and now a doctorate with a concentration in sports education, the first in the country. With that being said, I love looking at it from the business. When you look at the cultural components in the business, let me let you jump right back in here, Charles, real quick. Did you want to add something to it?
Yeah, well, I was curious in terms of what do you think the market would be like for the people that come behind Eddie George or Deion Sanders, whether you have an assistant coach, a hot assistant coach in the HBCU landscape, and we know these things are cyclical, but what does the marketplace look like for a Cedric Thornton, defense coordinator at Alcorn, or a Richard Moncrief, who's quarterback coach at Alabama State? What do you think the market would look like for them coming in?
I really think it's going to be based on the institution. If you have an institution that has a concern over the years in terms of just winning first and thinking winning is going to help them bring in attendance, that's going to be a different framework for the athletic director or VP of athletics when he looks at his decision in terms of football. Let's add in basketball. You have some institutions that may be more driven as a basketball institution as they see as the winning ticket in terms of the athletic revenue generating in that department versus conference members that are a little more football centric in doing it. You're also going to have to take a closer look at the athletic director. We can't take that out of the equation, and the relationship between the athletic director, the president, and to some components, the board. How are they in concert of how they see revenue being played? If you have a president, right, that is real open to athletics and sees athletics as an incentive and a window, as a lot of people say, to the university, they may be a little more open to open the pocketbooks to saying, we'll find a way to support the cost. Whether we're going to ask our athletic director and the coach to be more of a, revenue generator in terms of connecting with the community a lot more to get that cost up, or you're going to have a board president that are about cost containment, making sure costs do not get out of what they see as out of whack with what they're framing. So I think it's a real challenging question, but it's a great question because you really have to get in a position where you're a little more careful and stop looking at this in terms of HBCUs or at a conference level. You really need to go into the details and look at minutely of each institution. How are they branded? How do they work? And this is where it gets challenging of bringing a conference together because they serve in so many different capacities. An institution like Prairie View that is increasing in terms of its enrollment, that is double that of Valley, has a different way that they're going to manage and look at the assets than Valley does, because they just don't have as many assets to, split up and look at. So their ability to even go out there and pay a coach such a money, it's just not going to be there. So to me, your attitude, if you're at Valley, for example, whether it's basketball or football, you need to kind of look at the model that Bethune-Cookman does, is being a great talent evaluator. Kudos to VP of Athletics, Lynn Thompson, in regards to being able to find young, hot coaching talent that seems that many people really focus on, but seem to overachieve, and understanding that once they have success at Bethune-Cookman University, that they're probably going to move on. That's fine, because you know the ability to go get the next hot person, right? So your framework of doing things are different versus if you're a Jackson State or Prairie View, where you have large enrollment, or you have a bigger brand that you can associate. You have a stadium that allows you to sell more tickets at a higher level. You can put that back in your budget. So you might stretch the budget a little more to say, hey, let's take this calculated risk in terms of bringing in a brand name that can help us get the marketing. There's a report on US Today talking about the financial money associated with the name value that Jackson State is getting out there, which could in turn to larger enrollment, which helps you. And so that's the thing, is you got to connect the dots, as Tolly was talking about, in a lot of ways, to take that deeper dive. And this is what we talk about, as you familiar with in our classes, of really understanding the financial side of the business of sport just as much as you understand the culture. And that's where it really gets tough, is understanding the mix between. Because what they do at Southern may be a different framework of wanting to hold on to the culture, but they may have a state body that says you're going to have to cap what you're doing. FAMU is fighting that in terms of trying to find that magical mix in terms of capping. But what they've been able to do, what Jackson's able to do, and Southern's able to do a little more, is they have booster groups that are larger, more active, and more together in regards to offsetting that cost with booster supported money that you don't necessarily see at Texas Southern or Prairie View, for that fact, in regards to how they're able to use the enrollment numbers to help drive the cost. So those are things that you have to really play with. A little bit on the business side, we'll get back into it. We're going to take a quick break. Dr. Mills inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is out on assignment, so we have our regular Sunday guest, DJ Jones, and I just need to say he's part of the team in terms of our Sunday show, the HBCU football analyst. But we have a really great guest, Tyler Carr, who's becoming part of the team as well, representing Winston-Salem State, the Rams out of the CIAA. Yeah, they in the house. Make sure we give love to all our HBCU programs out there. With that, we even find some love from the SIAC teams and Gulf Coast Athletic Conference teams, as we talked about their expansion and things of that nature. But when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about the football and give you the last half of the show in regards to getting into the numbers of what took place yesterday. This is Dr. Ville with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. We'll be right back. Don't change that dial. We'll be right back after this message.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Are you hungry for authentic Caribbean food? Like jerk chicken, oxtail, red snapper, shrimp, tofu, and rasta pasta? Well, find your way over to Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta.
Them belly full, but we hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, open daily from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. And on Friday and Saturday, we're open till 4 a.m. Come to Mango's and put some spice in your life.
So we've got a good thing going.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta. For more info or directions, call 404-698-3992 or log on to mangoscaribbeanrestaurant.com. For instant coupons, text MANGOS to 313131.
Tell your mama hungry, papa hungry, brother hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, authentic Caribbean cuisines.
Open up the door. Tell them I'm a hungry.
Since 2000.
Talking about, they compress the analytic data with this hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna loud, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Ville with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is on assignment, and we have our Sunday team with us, BJ Jones, the HBCU football guru. We have Tyler Carr, HBCU Game Day, giving you insights that you can't quite get anywhere else. And we go inside the numbers, and that's what we're about to do right now. Let's get into some HBCU football of what took place on Saturday. Shout out to Chad Cooper, Tyrone Temple, Haley in the house. Chuck Hunt always giving us that much love. Alan Malone in here talking about Alabama A&M, hashtag Go Bulldogs. You knew they were going to show this morning. Monique A.J. Smith, good morning. No doubt, have not been here since you added the commercials. Great job. Thank you, Monique. She does a great job with Enchanted Garden. Go chat in the garden if you would. Check out her information there, making sure that she gives great information for the women in sports. Always a great show there. Chad Cooper, good morning from Baton Rouge. Go Jazz. Congratulations to UAP and Alabama A&M. I like that. Nice way. Ricky Burton, nowhere to go but up. No doubt about it. James Horton in here. Monique says, hey, Tyler Carr, Karen Griffin, jumping in here, showing some love. As we said, who we got here else we got in here just to give some other folks. George Atterbury, checking in from Washington, D.C. early this morning. Appreciate you representing the MEAC and Howard University. Donna, where some people out here, Wild Mayor, Will, Marshall and Sincere, Florida Memorial University. Yes, in the building. What's up, Fred? I see you. Giving some mad love at the Rod. I think that's the twin up here checking out. He wants to talk about some of these Bulldogs. We're going to get into it, twin. I know you're happy, twin, with your Bulldogs representing James Walter Hill Jr. Getting in here. Boy, I tell you, man, Neville Short from Birmingham, Alabama, 06. Oh, the Fred is in the house. Deep. See BJ Jones, see what we do here. See what we do. I know it. I got your red shirt coming. You know, I don't know why they sent me the red shirt. I can't do it, but you wear red. It looks nice on you. Absolutely. Do it like that. South Carolina State, let's get into it. They go on the road and defeat Delaware State in the Classic. Had to go to overtime, 31-28. Missed the field goal late. That thought that they could win it in regulation, if you would, before the end of regulation was not to be. For Delaware State, they were able to have them miss that, and then they come back in overtime. South Carolina State does get the field goal to win it, 31-28. A high-scoring contest, back and forth in a lot of ways. Total yards, 403 for South Carolina, 359 for the Delaware States. A couple of turnovers in the game. Delaware State had crucial turnovers, 3 of them to be exact. Let me go to BJ Jones to start it out. What are your thoughts in the South Carolina State-Delaware State matchup?
Oh, man, if you're Delaware State, man, you really one got away from it. If you look at the early part of that game, Delaware State really controlled that football game, and they were able to do it on the ground. Then, in that second half, South Carolina State really started locking it down. Delaware State had some uncostly turnovers, and next thing you know, South Carolina State's getting ready to pull it out before we go to overtime. I am amazed we talk about South Carolina State winning that ball game, but I'm amazed at how far Delaware State has come. If you look at where Delaware State was during the 2019 season, and you look at this team now, this team has really matured a lot, and they're not making some of the same mistakes they made in 2019. And for them to go toe-to-toe with South Carolina State, beat them earlier in the season, beat Howard as well, I like the direction that Delaware State's going. It kind of reminds me of the trajectory that we've seen with Arkansas Pine Bluff SWAC.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Let me give a shout out here. I got to do this. Brian Simpson, UDC in the house. Man, I think that might be one of the first time we get University of District Columbia to join us. Yeah, we're going to make sure you get some love. Congrats to the Jags, LaShawn Harris. With that, let me go to Charles. You about to jump in and thoughts to BJ, making a lot of sense there.
I mean, that's the perfect comparison. I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't watched a lot of Delaware State football, but that I've watched this year, you and comparatively to what they look like, previous years, they look like a much better team. I can't say enough in terms of they were able to run the ball. They got, like you mentioned, BJ, they got a win against South Carolina State earlier this past spring, but they look like a team that's really going to make some moves up there in the MEAC, and that's a great comparison, looking like sort of the arrow pointing up, just like UAPB. But it looks like Delaware State is really going to be an issue in MEAC.
Yeah, it'll be interesting in the fall. What's going to go up or down in the MEAC? Be reconfigured just like the SWAC. So it's interesting to see what that goes on. But for now, South Carolina State and Delaware State. Any thoughts from you, Tyler Carl, in terms of that big victory as South Carolina improves to 3-1, but if Hugh gets that winning record in the spring?
Well, I didn't check out the game because I was either driving or at a game yesterday. That was the entirety of my Saturday. But I will say this about South Carolina State. For the last few years, everybody's been trying to write South Carolina State off and say they're on the verge of closing and they're just barely hanging on. And I think with this mad max of the MEAC spring schedule, for them to really hang in there and to be that bell cow. I mean, Howard didn't want to play them, and COVID, they didn't want to travel, and they just hung in there and did what they had to do. They scheduled a couple of SWAC teams and split the difference there, and we didn't really know who they were after losing to Alabama A&M, because we didn't know who Alabama A&M was. But now when you look back at that game, that's a quality loss. Alabama A&M may turn out to be the SWAC champions. To come on the road and get a win in Montgomery, that was pretty a tough deal for South Carolina State, and tough in a good way. So when the MEAC resumes in the fall, man, and A&T not being in the picture, and somebody's going to need to jump to the top, if it happens to be a team like South Carolina State, I think that's really good for all that they've been through, whether it's been real or speculative. That's going to be a really cool deal. And BJ, all I've been reading about Darius Leonard, that next contract on the horizon is supposed to be a contract.
No doubt about it. Great point. Let me give it a shot.
He pays more tithes and offerings back to South Carolina State, man.
Right.
It could get interesting real quick, folks out here trying to make it happen in many different ways. Let me give a special shout out to G. Boone Holly as he gets in here. 50-year anniversary for Kappa Kappa Psi. He's a member of Phi Beta Sigma as well, but in terms of Kappa Kappa Psi, they were celebrating 50 years. It goes back to 1965. It's my understanding that they're the first undergraduate fraternity chapter, if you would, on the campus of Prairie View A&M University. One of the top 5 chapters of HBCU programs out there. So a lot of history for the Prairie View chapter of Kappa Kappa Psi. So I want to give him a special shout out. They had their anniversary yesterday as he was listening to the game and trying to celebrate. I think he took home a little celebration nugget with him, so they might be looking for him. You know how we do it. You get your hands on something, you don't let it go. So hopefully I didn't tell too much on Holly for him to get him in trouble. But let's get in here.
Real quick before we move on, every time I watch South Carolina State, there's a player that jumps out for me, and BJ, you can chime in. But Shaq Davis, every time I watch him play, I mean, he is like one of the most. We talk about receivers and swag all the time, but Shaq Davis is the truth. I think he went for 3 touchdowns yesterday. Every time I turn on the TV and watch him, he's going off. So I just want to throw that out.
Had big plays. I mean, he just was plucking balls, pointing at folks, just making folks look like little kids, because he's certainly a man. Go ahead, BJ, jump back in here. I know you want to say something about it.
Yeah, his catch radius and the catches that he's able to make, all you got to do with Shaq is just get it close to him. The way that he goes up and get it, and it seems like he has one of those catches every game where you just go, wow. He had 2 of them yesterday.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely.
Every time I watch him, he's making plays.
Yeah, you don't want none of that. You don't want none of that. We talk about that smoke. That's one smoke you don't want. with that, let's get in here. Obviously, Mississippi Valley State at Texas Southern was counseled COVID protocols, which makes it intriguing in terms of this Pine Bluff game. Not sure it's going to be played. Doesn't necessarily have to be played with the fact of the game that was played there. But before we get into that game, which is UAP defeating Prairie View 36-31, Jackson State got their victory over Alcorn 2-0 due to a forfeit by the Braves at the beginning of the season. Just have to acknowledge that was out there. But let's get into this Prairie View game. Shout out to Dwayne Lewis. He wanted to make sure I send everybody his apologies for the streaming problems that they had at the university. He checked it on Thursday. Everything was fine and things don't get in there. So I'm going to reach out to him for BCSN on behalf of BCSN and our producer, Roy Evans. You see, we don't have those kind of problems. But we'll see if we can work with them. But I'm serious on IT. They're supposed to be in there to get some things done. But you are always here to help. And so if we can be any part of making sure those things work out. But that was unfortunate because people visually got to miss a game. But kudos to Dwayne Lewis as he called a masterful game from the mic. And then he was joined by legendary Keith Jackson, played at Oklahoma. Many of you all remember Hall of Fame in Arkansas. He came up in the booth, brought in by the interim athletic director, and Dwayne made it work. They actually ended up sounding pretty good. Certainly had that Pine Bluff tilt, but it was the home crowd. They're supposed to have that. We almost, and when I say we now, I'm going back to my Prairie View roots. We almost ruined it for them, but not to be. They sent Prairie View home on those buses and see Mike disappears with the brick on his feet. We're going to have to get back with him on Tuesday and Thursday to make sure he understands. So as he talks, gotta take it, you gotta eat it. That's what we do in the SWAC, right, BJ Joe? So with that, let's get into this game. Boy, so many superlatives, so many different players making it. First downs was done 24-18, outgained them in terms of first downs, if you would. But third down efficiency for Prairie View was a major problem. 3-12, 2 of 4 on fourth down. Pine Bluff was 6 of 16, 2 of 3. Prairie View put up 410 yards, 346 yards in so many different ways. Big defensive plays on some sides, but big offensive plays as well. So you just seen it churning back and forth. The red zone struggles or the red zone big play for Golden Lions actually, to me, was a big part of this game in so many different ways. I'm going to go straight to BJ Jones, jump in here and break us down some of the matchups of what he thought here. Now I'll let Tolly sneak up and give us insights. I know he was focused and really going to give us the insight on the Magic City Classic, but I want him to be able to touch on this a little bit. Then we'll let Charles close it out. Go ahead, BJ Jones.
Man, if you're Prairie View, man, it was coulda, woulda, shoulda. Prairie View moved the ball well until they got to the red zone. You look at the missed opportunities. Prairie View could have won this game by a couple of scores, and then had an opportunity late. And it seemed like Prairie View just kept shooting themselves in the foot, whether it was penalty, whether it was unnecessary sacks that were taken. If you're Prairie View, man, you got to wake up this morning kicking yourself. And if you're a Jaguar, you're kicking yourself this morning because you were thinking the same thing. Oh, man, you're Prairie View, man. Prairie View has an opportunity. Looks like Arkansas Pine Bluff was going to pull it away. They jumped up 36-24. Prairie View storms right back and then gets in position to win it. And then, Prairie View, does the Prairie View and loses it. But great job by Arkansas Pine Bluff. People can say whatever they want to about Arkansas Pine Bluff. They're fading late or what have you. But they were able to get it done. And that defense, when it mattered, when it was time to make a play, they made it. They made several plays in the red zone, and that was the big difference in the game. Yeah, it goes back to that first game against Southern. Similar type of play. This is an opportunistic defense. Bend don't break. They can play well in certain parts of the game, but they know how or seem just to be able to make the big plays when necessary, enough to give what they can do on offense, which is really play with anybody in terms of putting up points. They are able to get it done. So it's fascinating. Kudos for the Golden Lions because they find a way to get it done. Let me go to Tolly to see if he has any thoughts in terms of this game. When you look at the fact that Pine Bluff was able to rush for 145 yards, pass for 200. So they're very balanced, which is also the other thing that is challenging about playing this Golden Lions team is that they're just not one-dimensional. They can do it in multiple ways.
a talented group of wide receivers, as B.J. Jones always alludes to when you're playing this team. And
the thing I was looking at, and I was trying to follow it on my phone and checking the scoreboard in Birmingham. You didn't know if Prairie View was going to be like South Carolina. I mean, like Alabama A&M, like the team that hasn't played forever, but they're really, really good. And would they be able to come right back and pick up where they left off? And the crazy thing about UAPB is, and it's almost like it's their identity. They're like the best team that you haven't fully, watched and bought into, and you keep thinking, all right, man, this is going to be the week where the real UAPB shows up, and they just keep doing it week after week after week. So they made their big splash, in the win against Southern. And you go back, that was like, I guess week 2 or whatever. It's kind of hard to track in the spring because so many people were on and off. But, a lot of people weren't paying attention to that game because we just thought Southern would go into that game, win, come out, and it would be your daddy's UAPB. Well, this is not your daddy's UAPB. And then you start to pay attention to them, and they didn't get all the big primetime TV games. So a lot of people still haven't seen what they're capable of doing. And, they haven't really gathered the eyeballs of the masses of the SWAC fans. And now it comes down to it's going to be them and Alabama A&M. And a lot of people are just waking up like, you mean I wasn't dreaming? Like UAPB has returned back to the 06 UAPB. And I just think that's perfect for the spring, man. This spring season has been a little different. It's been a little quirky, but, shout outs to the SWAC for getting it done where a lot of conferences didn't. And I just think it's going to be really a fun way to end it, to have this underdog and now, this juggernaut of Alabama A&M. And wouldn't that be something, man, for UAPB to come out on top of this SWAC spring?
Oh, man. Crazy. When you talk about Skyler, and as you said, this is not your grandfather's, grandmother's, granddad, grandmom's. It may be their Arkansas A.M. and N type teams that you're used to in terms of way back then a little bit. But let me go to Charles, get your thoughts about Skyler Perry is getting it done. 16-33, 201 yards, 4 touchdowns, had that 1 interception. Big fumble late by Prairie View's team is really finding a way to get it done. Man-child just making plays back there, at least give Prairie View opportunity multiple times, but not to be. Kudos to Arkansas Pine Bluff. What are your thoughts on this matchup, Charles?
Yeah, I mean, kudos to Doc Gamble. A good team find a way to get it done. And this, like I said at the opening, this was the game that activated about 6 different SWAC fan bases yesterday because, like Tyler said, this was the one everybody was expecting. Okay, this is when UAPB's slipper falls off. So it was, when people were sort of expecting Prairie View to go in there, sneak in, and get the win. And like I say, it activated fan bases because I had Southern people texting me, I had Jackson State people texting me, I had Texas Southern Valley. Everybody was, had their eyes on this game. So it was really fascinating to kind of see that running commentary going on with UAPB and Prairie View. But, kudos, UAPB, nobody saw it coming. And they kept the train on the tracks. And I'm very, excited, that you have one more team in the West that's going to make this West really, really interesting in the fall because right now, I don't think anybody wants to see Southern. I mean, they're playing some of their best ball, and to think that they can only get better going into the fall, that's scary. You take a look at UAPB and now Alcorn over there, and just me, Grambling has championship DNA, so I'm never going to count them out. So the SWAC West is just going to be tremendous when we get into the fall and let the pieces shake out where they may. But I tell you what, it's some playmakers in the Southwestern Athletic Conference. UAPB has some playmakers. Their receiving core going against Alabama A&M. When we get talking about that, that's going to be a lot of fun.
We'll get some time. We're going to stick in there. We'll spend a whole hour talking about that in a couple of weeks, but we might stick it in a little bit. We have a little time left. But let's get into this last one, the Magic City Classic. Before I do that, I did want to shout out Story Jackson. Boy, he continues to make plays all over the field in terms of their Prairie View defense. But Alabama A&M shows up, shows out 38-14 in terms of what's going on there. I guess you do have to ask that question with Doc Gamble. I believe the interim tag is removed from coach there over there at Pine Bluff in so many different ways about what he done this offseason. And he started looking at a contract extension and looking at what Dion and Eddie George and saying, hey, I could live with this too. But Alabama A&M gets it done 38-14, a big time rivalry game. I know BJ's family is like, man, what happened? And they were really going to be a classic matchup, it looks like, going back and forth. Alabama State had the formula that BJ Jones talked about, being able to run the ball, keep Alabama A&M's high-powered offense off the field, but then their quarterback gets hurt. I believe it was concussed. Didn't quite get a formal statement on that, at least during the game.
It was his eye. He got poked in the eye.
Oh, it was actually his eye. Oh,
yeah, he got poked in the eye, and his eye started swelling up, and it never got right.
So he couldn't.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that'll make it challenging. I wonder what it was. Thanks for that insight there. That's why we have him here, Tolly Carr. Gives you the information. Let me get out some numbers, and we're going to go back to Tolly to kind of get his thoughts in the game, what he's seen, and then we'll take it around with all the other guests on here. First downs, Alabama A&M 24, Alabama State 20. But yardage, Alabama A&M put up 484 yards, 285, much of that in the second half. 372 passing to just 104, but they even were able to rush for 112 yards, while Alabama State did rush for 181 and really did well early, but not enough in terms of the last part of the game, in terms of what you've seen there. Clean game, no turnovers. But Tolly, talk about what you saw in that matchup last night.
Well, you know, Alabama State was right there, man. They had the momentum early on, and you kind of felt like, you know, Alabama State might win this game. Nettles was able to move the team up and down the field, and you saw what you've seen from him throughout the year, his ability to put some touch on the ball and his ability to run, and you mix that in with Ezra Gray's ability to run. They had a lot of explosive plays in that first quarter. But on that very first touchdown, and you can see it, I explained it on our package that is on our YouTube channel and our website. When he goes in, that first touchdown, he almost got in. He was like right at the 1-inch line. And when he came up, he was kind of, you know, doing this with his head, and he stayed in the game. But when he went back to the sidelines, you saw that he had like a towel over one of his eyes. And I texted, you know, one of my sources at Alabama State, and they said he had swelling. And I thought maybe he would go back in, but he never did return. And what was actually funny, on their second touchdown drive, I didn't even realize he was out of the game because Chris Scott has the same build as Nettles does. And they got the same height, and Scott actually drove them down and scored on a passing touchdown. And, you know, I was so far up. And I thought it was still Nettles in the game, and then me and Mo Carter was like, "Hey, they got to change the quarterback." And then we figured out what was going on. But there was two key plays in that game. At the end of the second quarter, right before halftime, Alabama State has to punt. Alabama A&M makes a big special teams play. They deflected the punt. It goes out of bounds at about the 30-yard line. Set up about a 46-yard field goal, and the kicker comes in, man, and he got maybe 46.5 yards on that ball, and it just barely went in. And that really energized Alabama A&M going into halftime. And when they came back out, man, they were on fire. The second big play, it might have even got called back for a penalty, or there could have been a penalty on the next play, but we all know what Akil Glass can do as a passer. But, man, he ran the ball about 20 yards and then trucked one of those Alabama State DBs on the end of the play. And that got them fired up some more, man. And they ended up, man, he had – and BJ can talk about this. You know, I'm not a football player. I'm just a fan. But, man, to see Akil Glass at midfield drop back and just put the ball just right in the basket. It was actually Zabrion Moore for 2 consecutive scores, man. His touch – and his arm strength he's just a class above the rest of the quarterbacks who are playing right now. Just that ability to throw the ball. And the thing with Scott, man, you know, he hadn't had the reps and playing time that Nettles has had, and he was trying to stay in the pocket and had some trouble passing the ball, but just his ability to escape and sense that pass rush, he didn't have it, because you saw plays where you knew if Nettles would have been in there, damn, he would have been gone and maybe picked up 10 or 15 yards on a run, and it ended up being a sack for Scott. And he's a young player, JUCO transfer, thrown in there in the Magic City Classic, so you can understand that type of pressure. But first half, very entertaining. Last 2 quarters, it was all Alabama A&M.
No doubt about it. Let's get in here with BJ Jones. You know both sides of this Alabama A&M and Alabama State with family connected. You lived there. You grew up with it in this game. So get in here and talk about this matchup and what it means, particularly for Alabama A&M to get it done, and what it means for the Alabama State Horns that didn't see it.
I think for Alabama A&M, I think you're very impressed with how the defense played really in the second half. They really, shut Alabama State down. Alabama State wasn't able to do anything. And then for Alabama State, man, I know they're frustrated down there, because I know, to be this close to a division title, and then to lose in Alabama A&M in the fashion in which they would. It was during the game yesterday, and my phone was blowing up about, hey, what's going to go on with the coaching situation? I'm like, whoa, man. The first half started and everybody was all optimistic, and then by the middle of the third quarter, man, we were ready to run somebody out of town. But the thing with Alabama State, man, they are very young. Most of that team being freshmen and sophomores. So you're going to have some growing pains. I didn't see them losing in the fashion in which they did, but that shows you how important Ryan Nettles is to that football team, because that fourth quarter, really the third quarter, and really all of the fourth quarter, you look at the energy level on that Alabama State bench, and it wasn't there. You saw a bunch of guys looking at the clock, ready to get up out of there. And at that point, man, Alabama A&M, even though they were only up by a few scores, that game was over at that point.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly in terms of, and it's just fascinating how key players, particularly if they're at the quarterback, maybe at the running back, even sometimes the wide receiver position, we see some special ones on defense, but how a key player or two can transcend a team and really put them on their back with the energy and get everybody to play up to a level. So it's fascinating when you see that. We talk about that with the quarterbacks for Alabama A&M and UAPB in terms of this season, or what they were able to do with talent around them, but how they just got everybody to play at a different level. Skyler and Glass, Akil Glass getting it done in so many different ways. Charles, what are your thoughts on this game?
I think one of the takeaways is Alabama A&M's defense surprised me a little bit. I think they are the Achilles heel, if you will, but they were able to really keep Ezra Gray in check. He had 100 yards, but 36 of it came on one carry. So I thought that was going to be one of the big keys for Alabama State to really stay in that game, is to really keep Alabama A&M's offense off the field. And Akil Glass, he's just special. I think he connected with 9 different receivers this game. Same thing with Jackson State. He connected with 7 different receivers. It's just so hard. And then you look up, Xavier Moore is open. He's hitting quals out of the backfield. And, he makes you defend the entire width of the field. So, they're a special team. They're a special offense. And it's going to be interesting to see, how you go about trying to defend this Connell Maynard offense. I take my hat off to him, because it's tough. It's really tough week in, week out to keep all those players in check.
Yeah. Since we had an overtime game yesterday, we're going to go in a little bit of overtime on the show just to tie a nice bow on this. But let's talk about a little bit next week's game, April 24th. We have some makeup games. We had some final games that were scheduled. Other than the personal things, I'm not sure how much they mean for everybody in general. We already know Pine Bluff is going to represent the Western Division, and you have obviously Alabama A&M representing the Eastern Division for the 2021 part of the 2020 season SWAC championship game brought to you by Cricket Wireless. With that said, you have Texas Southern at Pine Bluff. Obviously, COVID protocols, we'll find out whether this game will even be able to be played. You have Prairie View Jackson. I'm sure this is an interesting. Both of these teams want this game in a lot of reasons. People want to get a good taste in their mouth. They want to win to close out the season. Obviously, if you Ashley Robinson, in terms of the fan following for Jackson State, is feverishly. Attendance-wise, you want to get this game in. Alabama A&M, Mississippi Valley. Valley wants a chance to see if they can close out the season strong and make one last statement. Alabama A&M just wants to play so many games, counts or whatever, and they want to still get the reps, just like Pine Bluff, as they get ready for that championship game. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens between these two matchups with Texas Southern and Valley, as they were not able to play last week to be able to get a win on the field. So interesting when you talk about that. Any thoughts from any of you all in terms of next week's matchup? Charles?
I think you touched on it. Everybody wants to go out on a high note. I think Jackson State still has some data points that they want to take a look at, and no doubt Prairie View as well, so especially to getting over this loss to UAPB. So that'll be a good contest with Jackson State and Prairie View. Jackson State has been fortunate at least to get the last 2 wins over Prairie View, but if I'm Prairie View, I want to get those licks in now. I want to get that jab and get that right cross and let Jackson State know that our program is the one ascending, not yours. So it should be a good weekend matchup next week.
BJ Jones?
I think we know one of the biggest to look at is Alabama A&M, Mississippi Valley. Alabama A&M needs to beat Mississippi Valley, I think, by 6 or more to get the host of SWAC championship game. I'm not showing the points, but there's a certain amount of points Alabama A&M needs to win that football game by in order to host a SWAC championship game. And I know how important that is. So I'm looking there, kind of see how Alabama A&M looks against Mississippi Valley. And see what that Valley defense can do against that Cornell Manor offense. And then Jackson State and Prairie View. Jackson State has had Prairie View's number. We've seen Jackson go in as an underdog to Prairie View. The last 2 times they met didn't mean anything. Jackson State was able to beat them. And I would like to see that game to see if that continues. I know that both of those programs want to end this spring season on a positive note and then take something positive going into the fall season. So those are the 2 games that I'm looking at for sure.
Tyler, any thoughts in terms of next week's matchup?
Yeah, BJ beat me to it, but the point spread in Alabama A&M and Mississippi Valley State is going to be things that people are going to watch very closely, because where you play that SWAC championship game is going to be important. But I have a rooting interest. One of those cities is shorter distance than the other. I want to see a good game, but save me a few hours. I'm not going to be mad about it. But seriously, I think the Jackson State game with Prairie View, Quincy Casey, look, it might be your last curtain call, man, to leave it all on the line. We know who's coming in the fall. So a good chance for not only the quarterback, but for Jackson State. You don't want to end that spring on a 4-game losing streak, because everybody remembers the last game that you played. So if you can get a win and look good in doing it, you can talk about that going into the fall. Not that Jackson State has a shortage of things to talk about, but they definitely don't want to have a 4-game losing streak hanging over their head. Well, I guess if you count the win over Alcorn, that kind of broke up the losing streak. But
yeah, I count it.
Well, you did, Charles. But those
Speaking of you, Charlie, any thoughts, early thoughts on the Alabama A&M and Pine Bluff championship game? Obviously, we need a little more to find out where the game is to be played, and so nothing sticks fine here. But anything that you want to keep your eyes on, just an early thought of that SWAC championship game.
Well, for me, man, I'm all about telling the storylines, which is why I bring BJ Jones on to talk about the X's and O's, because that's not my area of expertise, and I've never pretended that it is. But I just think these are 2 great stories, because at the beginning of the year, nobody thought anything about UAPB, and we didn't know if Alabama A&M would even be in contention, because they had the worst luck ever when it came to just getting a game played. So you really had 2 teams that kind of One rose from the ashes of doubt, and the other rose from the ashes of I can't get a game because of COVID. So it's going to be a lot of great storylines to talk about, and that's where a lot of the excitement is. But I think in this case, we'll have excitement on the hype side, and then we're going to have a lot of excitement with the actual game because it's going to be quality teams.
DJ Jones?
I think, you know, the only SWAC championship that Alabama A&M has won came over Arkansas Pine Bluff during the 2006 season. And it was a season similar to this one, where, you know, both of the teams, Alabama A&M had, you know, came back from losing the 05 championship game, was able to navigate through the East. Arkansas Pine Bluff came out of nowhere in the West. Both teams, Alabama A&M was built on defense back then. Arkansas Pine Bluff was a team with a high explosive offense. I think with those two teams coming together, you have the receiver core for both. I think you have an argument, probably 1 and 2 in the conference. The quarterbacks have played the best out of anyone in the conference during the spring season. And remember, the last time these two teams played was in Huntsville, Alabama. Arkansas Pine Bluff came into Huntsville, Alabama, and embarrassed Alabama A&M. I think the score was 54-24, or something along those lines. It was they took them to the woodshed. So Alabama A&M has turned things around since that particular point. Hadn't lost in that fashion. It's going to be interesting to see how far these programs have come since the last time they met back in 2019 up in Huntsville.
Charles, jump in here and give us some real too early thoughts on this 2021.
I feel bad for the DBs in this game. When you talk about Xavier Moore, Abdul Fattah Ibrahim, Abdul-Hilaire for Alabama A&M, Harry Ballard, Josh Wilkes, Tyron Ralph for Pine Bluff, I mean, the balls will be flying early and often. So, you know, whatever your best cover two shell is, I don't know. You know, BJ, it's going to take a lot to keep these offenses down, and I'm looking for a big high scoring game. Both teams they run the ball, I guess, for the receivers just to catch their breath. But you know, it is what it's going to be. It's going to be a fun, exciting SWAC championship with two of the best offenses that I think we've seen in the SWAC in the spring.
No doubt about it. This is Dr. Ville with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. We have BJ Jones jumping on in this, giving us some updates in terms of the HBCU football guru. And then we have HBCU Game Day, Tyler Carr. Stick with us. We're going to take one last break. We're going to come back and tease you a little bit and get you ready for the fall 2021, and kind of close out this segment looking really, really forward in terms of what you can be excited for in terms of the MEAC and the SWAC, for that matter, in terms of 2021 fall. Might even sneak in a thought of CIAA and SIAC in terms of great football to come. With that, stick with us. We'll be right back after this quick message.
Since 2002, Empowerment Resources, Inc., a nonprofit organization, has empowered more than 1,500 youth and adults in Duval and surrounding counties through its programs Journey into Womanhood, Girls Mentoring, Life Skills for Teens, and parenting education coaching. To get involved with programs, volunteer, or donate, visit www.empowermentresourcesinc.org. Follow us on social media, facebook.com/empowerment.resources and instagram.com/empowermentJAX.
Now, you can live in Texas and not have a good red meat blend. Texas Cowboy Dust is designed for steak and other red meats. It's out to be my most popular spice blend, made with onions, peppers, ground mushrooms, pink salt, and other spices. Texas Cowboy Dust also goes great with chicken, pork, vegetables, and adds a restaurant quality sheen to gravies and sauces.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down.
Talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want a lot, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Ville with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with our extra time OT drive in terms of sneaking in some fall 2021. Any thoughts before we get into the SWAC in terms of that? Let's start CIAA, SIAC. We can combine them together. Any thoughts in terms of those programs? Any early thoughts in terms of the fall 21 football season for the CIAA, SIAC? Starting with BJ Jones.
In the SIAC, will Tuskegee go back to being Tuskegee? They've lost uncharacteristically the last 2 years. They have not been the dominant Tuskegee that we're accustomed to seeing. Can they return, or does Miles College keeps being the new Tuskegee in the SIAC? And the CIAA, can anybody challenge Bowie State? Can anybody challenge Bowie State? Are they going to make another run as the CIAA champions and another run for the Division II playoffs?
Charlie, I seen you look. Are you gonna tell us something? Winston-Salem State, can they challenge Bowie State?
I mean, who can anybody? What is BJ over there talking about, man? I got the red on for him. He can't see all this red over here. But look, put my Homer hat aside, man. Fayetteville State has been the team in the CIAA South. I'm going to have my eyes on them. Of course, Winston-Salem State is always going to be in the picture. You look at Bowie there; they've been the team to beat. So I think those are the three teams until someone differently comes along and makes some noise that you have to watch in the CIAA. On the SIAC, my man Coach G down at Albany State, what's he been cooking up the last couple of years? I think BJ was right on the head with Tuskegee. Will your daddy's Tuskegee show back up, or have they lost the ground to the rest of the conference? And you can't forget Coach Ruffin, man. They're at Miles. I don't care how they start the season; they always finish the season stronger than anybody there in the SIAC. So I'm going to be really glad, man, in the fall to see the Division II guys get back in the mix, man, because it feels like they've been gone for the last 5 years, the way this COVID year has felt. So it'll be really good to see them back in action.
Charles, what you thought? SIAC, any thoughts in terms of fall 2021?
Yeah, that's a big question. Can Fayetteville challenge Bowie State? I look at Bowie State. They've been the standard bearer for the past couple of years at CIAA. And, my Tuskegee people, they text me all the time, about, we should be in the SWAC and all that great stuff. And it's Miles SIAC right now. So, they Tuskegee people, they kind of had that Jackson State swagger all the time. And, Miles has been taking a number past couple of years. So it is what it is. I can't wait to see Ray Ruffin and his guys come back out.
Yeah, great points there. Let's talk about shout out to Virginia State. I think that's a team to keep your eyes on. I like what they're doing there. Virginia Union quietly building some blocks over there. And then shout out to Allen, Edward Waters, as they start to build into the SIAC. Can they start to climb up the hill? I think everybody else you talked about are right dead on in terms of what's going on there. Shout out also to Langston as they play in the NIA. They're always strong in terms of what they do out there, and they got a big pub in terms of first round women's WNBA pick in terms of getting that announcement yesterday. So much love to Langston. Make sure we sneak that in there. Let's go into the MEAC.
Doc, really quick while we're doing shout outs. Shout out to Willie Lanier, Morgan State alum. He has the Hunt Fair Project. He has built a new turf field at Virginia Union at Hovey Field there. Also a new turf field at Central State. So the Honey Bear Project, look it up if you can contribute to it. He's looking to really make an impact at HBCUs by building new facilities there. And so far, the first two schools have been Virginia Union and Central State. Willie Lanier, an HBCU and NFL legend. So shout out to him.
Awesome.
Shout out. Hey, and those fields look good. I've seen them. Great point. Glad you got that shout out in there. In terms of the MEAC, let's go with the MEAC next. Obviously, it changed and reconfigured. Sticking with you, Tolly, in terms of the MEAC, any people that you want to keep your eyes on the football side of things?
Well, there's been a lot of practice going on in the MEAC. Trey Oliver, what's going to happen there at North Carolina Central? BJ might have some feelings about that. A&T is gone. We talked about South Carolina State earlier. We got a change at Norfolk State. So I think with the MEAC, man, it's going to be a lot of wait and see because there's been a lot of change since the last time they played football there. But if I had to pick a clubhouse leader, I might keep my eyes on what North Carolina Central has.
Great points there. And what's interesting is you will get to tease yourself out with the MEAC because with the smaller number of teams, they play all their games in the backside of the season. So you have a lot of chance to see what they do non-conference wise, but it'll be fascinating to see when the action starts to roll off. What does it look like? Going to you, BJ Jones, on the MEAC. Any thoughts there?
Wouldn't sleep on South Carolina State. We saw what they were able to do in spring. I know it wasn't South Carolina State like. We haven't seen that South Carolina State defense like we're accustomed to seeing, but somehow they've been able to get it done. I'll keep my eye there. North Carolina Central returns a lot of talent on that football team. Year 2 of the Trey Oliver era. Let's see what goes on there. I would not sleep on Morgan State and what Tyrone Wheatley is doing up there. I think they might have a lot to say about who ends up winning the MEAC when we get things kicked off in the fall.
No doubt about it. Charles?
Morgan State. That's the team that knocked off North Carolina A&T. That was the team that impressed me. But for me now with the MEAC, South Carolina State has to assert their dominance in the conference. There's no more A&T, no more FAMU. They shouldn't be, the little brother to those programs anymore. So I really look for South Carolina State to really assert themselves even more. And they have the talent. I think, like BJ mentioned, the defense hasn't been what we've become accustomed to with South Carolina State. But yet and still, they should have the talent. South Carolina, fertile talent base, and they should continue to do well in the MEAC. So I really expect South Carolina State to really assert themselves.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because you got a lot of folks that are going to feel like they have an opportunity now in the MEAC to assert themselves as the top team. And we'll get a chance to see exactly who does that. Obviously, North Carolina, A&T, and Hampton in the Big South. That'll be interesting to see what goes on. We talked a little bit.
Am I going to have to start covering the Big South? We need to take a people's poll. I got these 2 schools there, and you got to have the context to go along with it, man. That might be a new workflow. We might need a Big South reporter here at the game day.
Yeah, you're going to have to find a way to keep it in the mix. It's just a lot of that, to me, is going to be determined how well those teams get off to a start in regards to them. Are they able to win some of those games? It's like Tennessee State and OVC. Obviously, with Eddie George, you have
better than that.
Yeah, you have a reason now, but the problem you had in the past is you cover them for the first couple of games, homecoming maybe if they were playing the HBCU, obviously John Merritt Classic, and then the big one with Southern Heritage Classic. But after that, you get into a game and they start losing, you'd be like, oh, well, we'll catch them next year. So you got to win. It doesn't matter what conference you're in. You got to win or you become an afterthought. And if you're outside of the HBCUs where you don't have cultural lines, at least find a way to make you relevant. You fall off a cliff and disappear in a lot of ways to me. And that's what I try to tell people as we talked about the business side and the culture. Part of the HBCU is finding how to marriage the two. And if you're not careful and you get one of those equations wrong, you can fall off that cliff real quick. With that, what everybody's excited about, at least for me, is the SWAC 2021. In my opinion, the SWAC is going to be at least 5 deep in each division. Not an easy week off. We kept rolling the schedules out for most people. And we'd be like, man, those last 4 or 5 games, And each time you saw a schedule, those 4 or 5 games here in this middle, these 4 or 5 games at the beginning, it's just going to be that. That's just what it's going to be in the SWAC. It's going to be truly, as they say, rough in the SWAC on the football. And we'll get into the other sports later on. But let me go back to you, Tolly, as you talking about covering this. This has to be fun in a lot of ways. What are your thoughts in terms of way too early predictions for the SWAC, East and West?
Man, look, I'm already thinking about the Orange Blossom Classic, like how big that game is going to be. FAMU and Jackson State, the welcome FAMU to the SWAC. We were sitting there looking at Jackson State's schedule last night. Charles, y'all gonna beat Delta State, man?
I tell you what, it's going to be interesting. You cannot discount the fact that Jackson State will have the number one recruiting class coming in. I think a lot of people snicker at that because, kind of the cry is wait until the fall. But you know what? I tell Jackson State fans, you better believe, because I think that staff, they have a firm grip in terms of what they're bringing in. They understand what they're bringing in. They know what their needs are. And I think one of the biggest things is Deion Sanders had said, I got this spring in, and it gave me an opportunity to really see what I need. And he said from the jump, I'm building toward the fall. So, that's when the data points for Jackson State should really start in terms of what he has said. This will be the team in the fall. So I think Jackson State will be in the mix.
That schedule is tough early. So it's
yeah, it is. It is. It really is. And, they're going to have some growing pains, I think, initially, but I kind of, in my head, have them looking a lot like Southern. Southern, in some ways, they take some punches early, but they start playing much better ball once we get toward, October and again going into November. So I could see the same sort of dynamic. I mean, but I'm always impressed by Dawson Odoms, what he's able to do with Southern. But if Jackson State can kind of mimic that sort of that trajectory of Southern's team next year, they'll be in the mix.
Doc, I'll tell you what's going to make me laugh, man. All spring, we've talked about everybody but Alcorn. If we get here in the fall and the Braves just come in and just slap their way through the SWAC, man, that's going to be funny.
That's going to be, I think it is just going to be hard. A couple of things there. I think just with the new infusion of talent, they were solid, and credit to what they did over the years, and they're still going to be solid. But you just throw these two new teams in the mix. You have another extra year of Alabama A&M getting better, understanding their program, another year under Maynard, and then Alabama State looks like they're chugging towards something. And that's why I said 5 deep. And this spring gives you that indication. It's not just about Alcorn being good, but to me, not playing is going to force you to take a step back, and everybody else, by definition, are getting better for the most part. Even when you talk about Valley in terms of what they're doing on the defensive side, to some degree, the recruiting at Texas Southern, so they're trying to make that emergence. But you see what Alabama A&M is doing, and I don't think they're just going to have that much of a retread. For the most part, the team is coming back. Pine Bluff, the team is coming back. So those teams have gotten better. So your matchups just become more challenging in each place. And I'm going to let BJ Jones put the final print on this. What are your thoughts in terms of SWAC? 12 teams, 6 in the East, 6 in the West, the depth, the matchups per week. Alcorn sliding over to the West, which creates the rivalry with Southern now becomes a divisional game. The rivalry with Grambling becomes a divisional game. Key matchups between Prairie View and Alcorn. That West is tough in itself already, and you add the champion for the last 5 years, and that just makes things more challenging. So your losses to a team do not just become a conference loss. It becomes a divisional loss, so it's much more. And we talk about the East being deep. FAMU, Bethune-Cookman, Alabama State, Alabama A&M, and Jackson State. And let's not forget about Valley, at least what they're doing on the defense. And they made a charge in terms of the offense, too. The quarterback play is good there. What are your thoughts in terms of this SWAC?
Man, this fall, man, is probably going to be the most anticipated SWAC season we've seen in a long time. We have FAMU coming in, Bethune-Cookman. And then you also look at the mainstays. Grambling is not going to be down for long. All right, so I wouldn't count Grambling out. Alcorn, we know what they are there, okay? Arkansas Pine Bluff, they're going to bring back a lot of those guys in the fall. They're going to bring back all of them. Southern, this is the most important thing to know about Southern. Down 9 starters most of the spring. They were down 2 more yesterday. So that was 11 starters out yesterday against Grambling. They were able to do that. Southern's going to bring back those starters plus the kids that were playing this year that you don't know the names of yet. You saw them play, you know numbers, but you don't know names yet. Bring those guys back. There's going to be a lot of anticipation there. Jackson State, with what they bring in the fall. And then FAMU is a team that I think everybody's forgetting. If I had to name a favorite in the SWAC clubhouse right now, it would be the guys down in Tallahassee. Because if you look at that roster of what they brought back from 2019, a team that the only reason they weren't in the Celebration Bowl was because of sanctions. So when you look at what they bring back, plus what they added, FAMU is coming into the SWAC and they're coming into it loaded. But when you look at the SWAC as a whole, it is SEC-like. When you talk about the teams that are here, it's not out of the realm of possibility that this spring, with not everybody playing, that the SWAC could end the spring with 3 ranked teams: Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Alabama A&M, Southern. The SWAC might come into the preseason with 3 or more ranked teams when you add FAMU. So it's going to be interesting, and the SWAC has now become murderous growth.
Man, we're going to leave it right there, put the pin on it, man. You close it out really well, have me excited about what's going forward. But we still have a little bit left to play for this spring. But man, it's going to have some fun going into the fall. Plenty to coverage, plenty to talk about. Woo! Put your track shoes on. It's going to be interesting. For that, I want to say thank you for the listeners of Inside the HBCU Sports Show, Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Paville, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is out on assignment. We have BJ Jones, HBCU football guru. We have our guest of HBCU Game Day, Tyler Carr, giving you all the information. Make sure you follow HBCU Game Day. Go check them out on YouTube. Subscribe, just like you would do for Inside the HBCU Lab. We need you to subscribe. Keep the numbers up. Keep it coming. We appreciate you. We're right here every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock. We look forward to next week as we discuss the latest in the lab. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Paville, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's DrKenyattaCavil. That's DrKenyattaCavil. Inside the HBCU Sports Lab 1 on Facebook. Inside the HBCU Sports Lab on YouTube. Dream big and continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Tyler.
I forgot my line.
Of course. VJ Jones.
Lecture.
And Charles.
Dismissed.
All right.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. Yeah. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. I tuned into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won a lot.